So my name is Sarah Morger, and I'm going to talk to y'all today about gathering more volunteers and more activity within the Special Olympics organization and kind of my experience as I'm a coach and actually a unified partner. So let me give you a little bit of background on Special Olympics. Overall, there's about 6.5 million people in the U.S. with intellectual disabilities. And an intellectual disability is basically autism spectrum disorders, Down syndrome, fetal alcohol syndrome, anything under that range of disabilities. And around 1% of the world population, which as of right now there's approximately 7 billion. So that's a lot of people. Let's be honest, that is a lot of people. And when you think about that, 4.4 million athletes worldwide. That's how many people are actually in Special Olympics and competing in different sports all over the world. That's a crazy amount of people, but it's not enough compared to the number of people that we could have competing and enjoying sports. And they range from about ages 8 and up in 170 countries, so it's around the world. And then we have all the different volunteer opportunities. These are the ways you can get involved, and anyone you know could get involved. Unified Partner is basically you're qualified to play the sport with them. In my case, I swam with them, I played basketball with them, and you compete with them on their teams for different events that they go to or competitions. Then you can just volunteer at the events, you can just help out at the practices, you can fundraise, you can actually organize events for your local chapter if you choose to. And officials, if you have official training, there's so many different ways you can volunteer. So, let's get into my experience. So, I actually volunteered with my hometown's Special Olympics because the leaders of the class and our special education teacher went to my church. I grew up with her son who has Down syndrome. We had about 10 to 25 kids at each practice depending on the day, if anyone's sick, if something went wrong at school, things like that. We had a bunch of different sports I personally competed in or helped coach: basketball, swimming, and triathlon. I'm also helping with soccer and track when I go back home later this month. We actually only have 1 day a week practices, and the seasons are very short, maybe about a month each, and there's only one event per season. So they will train for a month, maybe 2, depending on which season it is and which sport, and then they only get 1 event. So it's kind of in proportional to the amount of work they're putting in. There's also, I worked with a ton of different disabilities. Down syndrome and autism spectrum disorders were the most common, but we also let in, although it's supposed to be just intellectual disabilities, because our hometown's so small, we actually have quite a few kids with disabilities. We had physical disabilities as well. And I'm going to go ahead and show you some pictures. This is from our big basketball game a year or so ago. Some of these athletes that you see in the picture in the wheelchair, like these two, they actually don't have wheelchairs. They're just competing in the wheelchairs to help out the kids who have wheelchairs and are wheelchair bound. They are kids with special needs, special disabilities, but they just wanted to help out their friends and compete with them. So there's that. And then here's some of our younger athletes. For one, number 15, he is in high school, and the little girl, I believe she is in middle school. But you see these two girls right here, they're actually on the high school basketball team. They're unified partners. Most of our high school basketball team, the swim team, and a bunch of other sports, they actually become unified partners to play at both of the high schools in our hometown. And then this is just a little bit more of our kids playing. The boy in the background in the white jersey is also a unified partner. He is also a coach. Moving on, our problems. There's not enough funding. Everything that we do is backed by the parents or by the volunteers. It's kind of expensive depending on where we have our events. We drove from Boerne to San Antonio often for our different meets, things like that we did. They drive from their house, which could be up to 30 minutes away from our practice site every day. And depending on which family it is, they could have up to 3 or 4 different children that they're trying to get to practice. So it's a little bit of a hassle for them, and it actually costs them quite a bit to be involved, as well as the volunteers, because we put a lot of money and time into this and getting them to events. There's also not enough volunteers. It may seem like there's a lot when people talk about it, but there actually isn't. There should be at least 1 volunteer to each child, if not 2. Some children, it's harder for us to keep track of them because they get distracted so easily. With autism, everything around you is basically in hypersensitivity mode. You see everything, you hear everything, and it all is bombarding you all at once. So when they're there practicing, they're around all these different kids, and they can't keep track of what's going on, and they get really confused or they get really hyper, and it's hard to control them. So depending on how many kids you have, you may need at least 2 volunteers with each person. So in that situation, it can draw some of the coaches away from their coaching duties to try and help and take care of these kids. And it's also good to match them up with kids that are appropriate personality-wise to be involved with them. I know I worked with about 4 or 5 kids that they clicked with me for some reason, and we're really good friends, and they listened to me. So that's what you kind of look for in those volunteers. So it'll depend on each person. There's also not enough coaches. We, as coaches, get minimal training in order to be a coach. You do get training, but it's only about 2 or 3 weeks long, and it's a little bit going out of your way to get it. But there is possibility for more, especially when it comes to learning about the disabilities themselves and adding more information about how the kids learn, how they react, how to handle them if they do react badly or if they're having a bad day even, because they're like us, they have bad days. And their bad days are 10 times worse than ours. And our solutions. There's not very many ads out there for Special Olympics, and they come out every now and then, especially right now with our basically the big game. It's everyone's competing, it's from all over the nation. That's about to come up. And every time there's a big event that goes on at once a year, there's some ads, but there's not enough. And including some of the stories of these kids would be wonderful because they come so far in their journeys, and it takes them a lot to get to what would take us maybe 2 days to learn. It would take them 3 or 4 weeks, depending on how bad their disability is. Not all of them are like that. Some of them pick it up quicker than you can. But some of them, it takes them a little bit longer. It depends on what they have. So we need a little bit more help on getting their stories out there so people actually understand their disorders, understand their disabilities, and we can quit the stereotypes and the stigmas. This will also bring about a little bit more support from the general public because if they're educated, they're going to understand why these kids are amazing. So there's also promoting the Unified program. It's the best program ever. You get to volunteer, you get hours for it, you get to compete in your sport, but you get to help out these kids. So it's a win-win for everybody. I think there should be more on college campuses because we do have a local chapter that they could be involved in. I don't see very often where there's Unified partners in college. High school, it's more often promoted because it's such a, they're closely working with them, the kids are already there on campus. It's less so on campuses except for like Texas Tech because we have the Burkhart Center. So there's more interaction with the kids that way. But there's also College Special Olympics volunteers. I don't know if any of you all know about that. That's basically Texas Tech's Special Olympics volunteer organization. They were at the Burkhart Walk this past weekend. There's the Burkhart Walk where you can just go hang out, get your face painted, play with bubbles, who knows what you do. Just walk around for a little while and you actually get to meet some of these kids because they're at the walk. And the Burkhart Center is awesome. It's a great way to get involved if you want to just go hang out for a little while or help with Parents' Night Out or something like that as well. They also have, I don't know if many of y'all know about this, but in the Burkhart Center there's a Quiznos. And the kids at the center that are in the transition program actually serve and work there. So it's fun to go through there. It's a better way to get Quiznos if you ask me. But other than that, I have a quote to go ahead and end this off. Let me win, but if I cannot win, let me be brave in the attempt. This is in the Special Olympics, so I think this embodies how we all approach life. I mean, we try, and if we can't make it, let us at least be brave. And that is the end. Thanks, guys.